That's what they would call dank.
Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Miranda and this is my best friend Allison, and today we are going to be getting baked and starting what might be, oh, I just shook my camera, what might be a new kind of series on here called Baked Goodreads, where we get stoned and talk about books that we've both read recently. So yeah, quick disclaimer, we do live in California, where it is legal for people aged 21 and over to consume recreational marijuana, and we are both 25. We are safely within my home and not going anywhere for the night. And yeah, if you do this, consume responsibly and have a good time. Yeah. So yeah, we will be back here in just a moment when we are both baked as hell.
And then now we just...
and now we just get baked. Do I look stoned?
I don't know.
I feel like I'm prepping like I used to when I would use my inhaler. Like, I would have to take several very specific breaths before taking my inhaler so I could inhale it, because I had to make sure I was breathing enough to take the inhaler, if that makes sense. But like, I would have to very specifically like hold it in front of my mouth and then take a couple breaths to prep myself to take my inhaler. I couldn't just and like go. I had to just be like stupid. So on this very first inaugural episode,
Inaugural? Are we presidents?
We are presidents. Episode of
Presidents of your face.
Oh. This episode of Baked Goodreads, we are going to be talking about Alex E. Harrow's The Once and Future Witches. Now,
so we're just gonna shoot till we get something good, right?
Until we get something good.
Okay. Do you need help?
I feel like I'm playing it up, you know?
Well, I mean, you know, what's behind door number 2? I don't know. But it's a good book. It's a really good book.
Yeah, so I'll read it. So it's about 3 sisters who, one of them joins the suffragette movement in the late 1890s, and from there brings magic back into New Salem and fights the patriarchy.
Basically.
Like we all do. You're just out here fighting the patriarchy.
Period.
And being witches.
Period.
And being gay.
That too. Which, funnily enough, one of the sisters in the book is gay, so
I brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah. The oldest sister is a closeted lesbian, and we love her. Her name's Beatrice. Really, it's 3 unorthodox sisters for the time, leading very unorthodox lives. The one sister's a lesbian, the second sister's pregnant out of wedlock, and the third sister, killed their dad.
Which you find out at the beginning of the book, so that's not really a spoiler.
It's not really a spoiler. Seriously,
really a
like in the very first chapter. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure it's brought up.
I think so.
First
Yeah.
or second chapter.
It's
in the
first like 20
pages. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In the first 20 pages, yeah.
Some shit like that.
And,
Yep.
there's some force that's, once they're all in New Salem, that starts to pull them together, and they're not really sure, like, what it is or what happened, but they, through their bonds of sisterhood, conjure a fucking lost magical tower that's filled with information about witchcraft and pretty much everything that they need to free themselves from the patriarchy. Pretty much everything they need to gain power again.
Yeah, and as you're going through the story, because it switches the perspectives, like each chapter, or even sometimes within the chapter, there's multiple narrations, and each is a sister's perspective. And so they definitely relate to the mother maiden crone. So Juniper, the youngest, is the maiden. Agnes, the one who's pregnant out of wedlock, is the mother. And Beatrice, the eldest one, who is a librarian, is the crone. So it works on that symbology. It takes a lot of like housewives' tales and nursery rhymes and folklore stories, and it takes all of those and basically associates it with magic, with women's magic, because there's women's magic and there's men's magic. And at one point they do experiment with bringing the two together, and or using men's magic and men using women's magic, but they don't go too in depth about that. But essentially they work with all of these women to kind of have this underground sisterhood called the Sisters of Avalon. And they do displays throughout town to show themselves that they're serious, that magic is coming back, that you can't control women, or you shouldn't be putting down women. And this is actually where my first criticism of the book comes into play, is because it starts out with Juniper joining the suffragette movement and feeling like she has purpose with it, but very quickly wanting to move away from getting the vote to just bringing magic back. And I went into this book expecting there to be a lot more about the suffrage movement, and it kind of very quickly, like, it used it as a jumping off point and then very quickly steered away from it. So that's kind of one of my criticisms, I guess, of the book, is that it uses the suffragette movement as a selling point, and I thought there would be more about it, and I would have liked to have more about it, but then it completely goes a different way. And by halfway through the book, like, the suffrage movement doesn't really matter at that point anyways. But the story itself is still really good. It's really interesting. It's just wasn't what I expected it to be.
And there also is the main part of the story, the bringing witchcraft back, isn't even like the main part of the story necessarily. Like, they are in a battle of wills with this mayor in their town who is like, I'm holier than thou.
Witchcraft is evil. Women need to not have the vote.
But he's like some sort of demonic creature.
Yeah, though he has a very, like, puritanical Christian at the time. I know, like, Christians aren't, well, some Christians aren't like this. Whatever, that's not the point. But has that very, like, at the time, the puritanical Christian, traditional values, men only voting, probably definitely a racist. Because let's not even get into what was going on with race at that time period. Be a long conversation. Well, it's a long conversation we should have, but unfortunately that conversation didn't happen in this book.
I mean, it's mentioned a little bit, but
it is mentioned, and that was the second criticism of the book that I had, is that she kind of also used the witches of color. Like, New Cairo is brought into play, and Cleo is brought in, and the whole reason the witches of New Cairo trust the Sisters of Avalon is because Cleo and Beatrice are kind of like a thing. And just to me, like, especially knowing how much danger they were probably in, being people of color in 1890s New Salem and being witches on top of that, it didn't seem like that was reason enough to put themselves on the line for the Sisters of Avalon to me. And of course, I mean, I'm a white woman, what do I know? It just seemed like a little bit unrealistic, and like they were there just to fill in some things that would have been plot holes without the New Cairo witches. Like, you know, so that was another, like, I wish there would have been a bit more of that issue brought up and dealt with, because it wasn't. Yeah.
No, it wasn't really addressed. I think that I don't think it was the author's intention, but I think maybe that people of color were just sort of brought in like as an accessory to the story a little bit. And
I mean, I think there's a validity, of course, to having the witches. Well, I mean, besides diversity, but they definitely had a very different magic system than the Sisters of Avalon and the magic that they were using. So yeah, definitely bringing them in had a purpose. It contributed to the plot in that they had a different magic system. They had different things that they could contribute to the Sisters of Avalon. It just felt like it all kind of happened very quickly, and that their reasons for contributing weren't good enough for putting all of those women in danger instead of just Cleo, if that makes sense. But I still liked it, and I really liked Cleo as a character. I thought she was really interesting, and I liked her magic. I liked her personality a lot. And actually, the romance between her and Beatrice I thought was really nice. I'm not usually one that's big on romance in books, but I really liked theirs.
Speaking of romance, the second sister, Agnes, she strikes up a romantic relationship with a young man named August, who they come to find out is a practitioner of magic, and he is very confident, but also like very self-aware that he's a man, and like what that comes with, I think. I mean, at least for the time period.
He's a gem.
He is a gem. He's an angel, and I love him, and we should protect him at all costs, because he did not look at Agnes as some like pregnant whore, excuse my language, but you know, he just saw her for who she was and wanted to love her anyways, despite any perceived flaws that she might have had. And that's what makes him such a likable character. You know, he genuinely wants to be there for her.
Oh, and he loved her baby too. You could tell he would die for Eve.
He loved her baby, and he loved her, and it didn't matter to him that the baby wasn't his or whatever. He just wanted to love her and wanted to make a family with her and take care of her. And
August is like probably the only man in that. Well, actually, there weren't that many male characters really to begin with, but absolute gem of a man. We stan a king. But yeah, other than that, there was some nice representation. Of course, we got Beatrice being a lesbian, but then we also get a trans character who's barely mentioned, but her being trans isn't like a big deal. Well, of course it's a big deal to like her family, but the way it's mentioned to Juniper is just very casual and to the side. And then that trans woman was also in a lesbian relationship, so I mean, like, we love it.
And I think that we all also get the whole like not needing to be saved trope from Juniper's character. Like, we don't have any romance or any like anyone coming in to swoop in and save her. She saves herself. You know, she's strong, and she needs her sisters, but
it's definitely a book more about the familial bonds and the bonds of friendship and sisterhood, essentially, and womanhood, than the romantic bonds. Because I mean, Cleo and Beatrice have a romantic relationship. Augustus and Agnes have August.
Because you're stoned.
Yeah, I am stoned.
It's okay.
August and Agnes, of course, have a romantic relationship, but there's also a lot of the driving factor is like the bonds of sisterhood, and you see these characters come through and basically end up empowering themselves and empowering others through this form of magic, and through the women who helped bring it to them. And on top of that, they actually gender bend some folklore as well. Like, they were talking about Queen Midas instead of King Midas, and there was another one.
I don't remember.
But essentially, they bring in a lot of like fairy tales and like Hansel and Gretel. That has a really big importance to play, especially in the end. But like Hansel and Gretel, I think they bring in like what, Rumpelstiltskin,
Sticks and Stones, right?
Yeah, and like all those nursery lines like Sticks and Stones will break my bones. But they find ways to take these phrases and turn them into magic. And I just think Alex Harrow had a very good writing style with it, and she had a very, very creative.
Idea of magic.
Yeah, very creative. And how they hid the magic, because the whole reason that these spells are now folklore and nursery rhymes and fairy tales,
they become lost,
is because they became lost, and as witches were being persecuted, and they had to hide them in places that men wouldn't think to look. So they became nursery rhymes and fairy tales and wives' stories and stuff like that.
And also at the end of the book, they end up living in the Tower of Avalon.
Fuck, I want to live in a tower like that.
Period. But along the way, they also meet the what do they call them?
The original three.
The original three. So these very powerful, like ancient witches, but also like they're kind of the three too. These three sisters, magic disappeared from the world. You know what I mean? And the original three got locked away in this tower, you know.
They basically bound their spirits to the tower. So they're dead. They're not living. But their spirits still alive in this tower.
And they're sort of the three. They're a big three, those three sisters. You know, magic had basically disappeared from the world. It was just such a minor thing. Spells to make your skirts straighter, your teeth whiter, your hair stay in place. But what they brought back to the world was like full blown witchcraft.
Like you could make someone's tongue fall out of their head if they broke a promise,
right,
a secret.
They brought real, just like concrete magic back into the world. And so I think like the author was doing a play off of the original three with the sisters as well. You know, they kind of,
yeah, no, it was good. It was really good. It's, yeah, definitely if you're going in thinking it's going to be all about magic entwined with the suffrage movement, it's not going to be. The suffrage movement is kind of used as a jumping off point. And the whole issue of women's rights turns into an issue of women's rights with magic.
It less turns into, we want women to have power in the home and in politics, to we want women to have power,
like reclaim their power. I'm like, it's a great message, it just wasn't the message that I thought the book was originally trying to sell. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I mean, like, look at this cover.
Beautiful.
Like,
perfect. Did you stone those tights? You look like Linda Evangelista. But oh, what was I going to say? I had something I needed to say about it.
Also, if the camera's shaking, the cats keep walking by and bumping into it, so.
Oh, Cleo's husband, because this whole time in this book, Beatrice or Bella, she goes by her middle name. Later in the book, okay, there's a cat screaming.
Calcifer, can you maybe not do that? Thank you.
So, with Cleo and with Bella's relationship, there was always this idea that, okay, we hear
what, Bubba? Yeah?
There was always this idea that Cleo had a husband and like a whole nother life, and why was she running around with Beatrice, you know, doing all this stuff, and come to find out that she and her husband are married simply for legal purposes, and to just say I have a wife, I have a husband, to pass
it's
straight.
It's a form of straight passing protection.
Because her husband has a boyfriend, we find out later, and that it's protection basically for them.
Yeah, so her husband's gay, she's a lesbian, they got married in this time period to basically keep each other safe, and so that if Cleo's walking around and people question her, she's like, oh no, I'm married, like I'm a married woman. So, I mean, her husband sounds like a real MVP, like, what
sounds
a bro.
like they got a real chill marriage.
Yeah, I mean, and in the time period that they're in, it makes sense that they would do that to help protect each other, to help squash any rumors or anything like that. It definitely just makes sense, and that was interesting to see how that like played into like a little bit of relationship drama. But yeah. I just want to be Beatrice though, like a witch librarian living in a fucking tower.
Period. Honestly, I think I would be cool being maybe any one of those sisters.
Yeah.
But
I mean, maybe not Juniper.
Maybe not Juniper. I don't want to spoil anything, but maybe.
No, this book is gonna have a spoiler. This video is definitely gonna be full of spoiler. I mean, we've been talking spoilers.
Well, she dies. Yeah. Technically, she dies. Yeah. But what they do is they bind her to the tower like the original three bound themselves and are still bound to the tower. And so Juniper, she still exists in the world, but she doesn't have a physical form, technically. Like, she's a spirit. And they bring, sometimes when Beatrice and Cleo go off to find more spells, they bring home, like, wayward girls and women, children, like witches, and they house them in the Tower of Avalon. And that's sort of Juniper's duty at that point in the series, and at the end of the book is because she was the whole driving force of this. Is she wanted to be the one to help people find their power and refine their magic. So even when Beatrice and Agnes were like, ooh, this is getting kind of dangerous, maybe we could stop, Juniper is just like, nah, I got an appointment at 7 to go distribute some spells, be back. She just kept doing it, even if when her sisters decided not to participate anymore for a period in the book, because Agnes was pregnant and worried about her baby, and then Beatrice, she lost her job because of it. Yeah, and her and Cleo were having issues. It's like a whole thing. Juniper still put her neck out on the line, and in the end, she ended up dying because... To save her sister. So I didn't charge my camera batteries, and they died, so this is on my phone now, so let's see how different the quality is. Anyways. So we were talking about
Gideon Hill.
Mm-hmm. He basically
he's the Hansel of Hansel and Gretel.
And the characters notice that weird
There's something
stuff
not
happens.
right.
Yeah, he's not right. Like when they look in his eyes, he's really soulless, and shadows seem to move in unnatural ways around him. And you find out that he's Hansel and his sister is Gretel, like Miranda said, and that he's actually an extremely powerful witch, a very ancient, powerful force.
Instead of being eaten by the witch, they were taken in by the witch when their mother basically abandoned them. And this witch taught them both magic. Well, Gretel took on to magic very easily. He had to work a bit more for it. So eventually, he finds a way to give himself more power and make himself immortal, essentially. And isn't it said that he's basically the reason for the Black Plague?
Yes.
Yeah.
That he spreads pestilence and violence wherever he goes.
Which is how he gets his power and stays immortal. And,
doesn't he, like, take their souls? Isn't that why the shadows...
Yeah, he gets rid of their soul and then takes over their body. Basically, soul transference to another body. But he needs, like, a big sacrifice to do it. And,
yeah, that's
and
why.
continue his power.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good.
I'm good.
So he is kind of this, like, elder god almost. I mean, he is really, really powerful, and the entire town that they're in, like, wherever he goes, he takes a position of power, pretty much, and the town that he's in is under his spell. I mean...
Literally.
When the witches came, when the Sisters of Avalon came, the shadows started to behave normally, right? Because people were finding their will and their power, and that's why he did not like them so much. It's not even that... I'm sure he hated women, but it's not even necessarily that he hates women. He hates anyone who would dare to defy him and his power, including his own sister.
Yeah. So Gretel became the maiden of the original three, or the first three, whatever they call them. And he ended up wiping out all witches because Gretel denied to be by his side and basically be under his rule. She was like, "Nah, fuck that." And he didn't think women should have that power and they should be subservient to him and he should have more power. And I think it really all boiled down to jealousy that Gretel was better than him and wouldn't bow down to him. But he was the original St. George who, like, drove out all the witches or burned all the witches.
But in reality, the reason he was burning all the witches was to gain power. Were these mass sacrifices of all these souls, and he gained a ton of power from it and kind of lost his way. You know, he kind of lost any and all sense of morality. Like, any conversation they have with him, he does not, like... He's not normal. Like, something is not okay with him. But when you meet the first three, the original three, whatever, you know, they very still have human-like qualities, even though they are these ancient, powerful beings, and they're not really human anymore. Yeah. Like, they still have compassion and human feelings and stuff, but he became so consumed with his quest for power that all went away.
Yeah, and so essentially the whole reason we brought Gideon Hill up, well, he's the main antagonist, and the reason Juniper sacrifices herself is because he's going to do a soul transference, and Juniper sees him in like this whole big fight that they're having as he tries to burn the three sisters. Well, shit goes down, there's other witches there to help save them, they get free of their bonds, they're fighting back. And they're trying to take Gideon Hill down. They know, like, essentially they can't hurt him physically until they...
Overcome him with magic, pretty much.
Oh, yeah. So it's hard to actually hurt him, but he can be killed. And during this whole thing, she sees his shadow that she knows is his soul, like, heading towards Agnes's baby. And she says, "You know what? No, fuck that." And she takes his soul in, but the only way that she can get rid of it is to essentially kill herself too.
To burn herself to death.
Yeah. So she sacrifices herself, and, like, I got teary at that. Like, that fucked me up.
That fucked me up.
That fucked me up.
Because this whole book is about these three sisters whose relationship was broken by their father, like, that they... I don't want to use the word tattled, but I guess they tattled on each other to their abusive dad, and Bella got sent away, and, like, Agnes got pregnant as a teenager, you know, and the baby's dad came and said, you know, we got rid of it basically, and she was trying to save herself from like a beating or something, you know, like these three sisters are fractured and they finally come together, and by the end of the book their bond is so strong, and then Juniper dies, and they it's a palpable thing for them, like they feel physically connected to one another this whole time, and when she dies it's like this piece of them is gone.
Quite literally.
And I definitely cried like a fucking baby. It made me... But when I realized that her soul was bound to the tower and that they could still be together,
and I think that's what Juniper really wanted, because her whole character, she wants to be this wild and free woman with, like, no responsibility. Mm-hmm. She wants to have had her grandmother's house was given to a cousin and not her, because, of course, women and property issues at the time, but whatever. You know, she wanted to be there at this house that everyone basically, like, just thought it was a shack, where it was, like a witch's cottage, essentially. And she wanted to be there, and then she sacrifices herself to save her sisters, who she thought had abandoned her and left her with their abusive father. And she sacrifices herself for them, and then the sisters decide, like, as that's happening, they're like, no, we can't let her go. And they find a way to redo the magic the original 3 witches used to bind themselves to Avalon, and they bind her to Avalon, and essentially she's now free to be that wild and free woman.
Right. She gets to do the free wild woman thing, which is just totally her. Like, she doesn't even brush her hair. Like, she's not a proper lady. She does not want to be a proper lady. She wants to be a witch. Above all else, she wants to be a witch. She wants to be free and be a witch. And she also wants to help women and help witches and girls and stuff. And so now she is A, bound to this place that is filled with magic. B, she's not really, I mean, she's dead, but she's not. C, she gets to be with her sisters, because, like, her whole narrative through the whole book is disappointment when she's not with her sisters. Like, she just wants them to be a family again. Now she can do all these things and not really be bound by society anymore, because they hid the tower again, you know? Nobody can get to their tower, basically, but them and these girls that they bring, and they're, you know, so she kind of gets her wish in the end. And the sisters get their wish too. They get to be a family. I mean, they kind of come in and out a lot. But she gets to spend time with her niece, you know, like, she gets to communicate with these women, with the original 3. Like, she gets the life that she wanted. It's unfortunate that she had to die for it, but it shows a lot about her character, and, like, even after all she and her sisters went through and all the perceived badness, she still sacrificed herself.
For the good of the world.
For the good of the world, for the good of her sisters, for the good of her niece, you know, like, she gave herself up so that everybody else could have a chance, and so that, like, witchcraft could have a chance to come back to the world full swing. She gave them that chance, because otherwise they would have been fucked. Had he gotten to her body, seeing as how these 3 sisters were really powerful witches, you know, they would have kind of been done for a little bit, because he would have had a young, powerful body to manipulate at that point, you know, so.
Yeah, but his whole downfall was he was used to taking over, like, weak-willed people, or potentially even infants. And Juniper was a grown woman with a strong will, and she said, fuck you, and took him down.
And that's probably the best part of the book. I mean, it'll wreck you. It'll definitely wreck you. You will feel it all. But it's such good storytelling that this woman is so selfless. The other sisters are kind of selfish throughout the book. Agnes and Bella are selfish, and they really are a lot of the times only thinking of themselves, you know, but Juniper doesn't really have that.
I feel like there both isn't like a selfishness and a selflessness to her, because she does things very recklessly in ways that can cause harms to others, so she's kind of selfish in that way, but her overall intention is to bring magic back to the world and help other women.
Yeah, she just wants, you know, she wants other women to be able to live without having a man tell them, like, what they can and can't do.
And it might also be selfish in its own nature, is because she wants that same thing for herself and needs these other women to make it happen on her own. But, like, I mean, whatever, we'll let that pass.
We'll let that pass, because honestly, the intent behind it is good. Like, I mean, she does cause some trouble sometimes, because she's young, she's like 17, So, and really, she's lived her entire life under the thumb of her father, and so
Very abusive father.
Yeah, and I don't think she was really allowed a lot of decisions, so I think when she finally got free from him, she just, went kind of crazy with the whole, I can do what I want now.
As you do.
As one does. Yeah, as one does, but her overall intention is just that she wants to save women, and that includes saving herself. So it is a little selfish, but doesn't every woman want to save women and themselves?
Yeah, like if you're out if you're a woman or woman identifying, and part of your desire to pursue equality is to better your own life too. Like, yeah, you're bettering other people's lives, but there's like a little tiny bit of selfishness to it, and also wanting your life to be better. And there's nothing to be ashamed about in that. Like, that's totally a legit
I think
reason.
People use selfish as that's a whole thing. Yeah. Because sometimes you have to be selfish. You can't let other people run you over all the fucking time. Sorry if it's selfish, even if it's family or what have you. But sometimes you have to. But I think that in her own view, she is not a selfish person. And in the way she's presented, she's not presented as a selfish person, even though, if you read into
she's kind of reckless and pushy.
Yeah.
But, she's it's one of those things where, it's because she really cares, and you can tell. It's probably annoying to be on the receiving end of that, and might feel a little bit, manipulative and pushy, and, totally get that. But, it's... Overall, she's trying to do good.
She's trying to do good, and I think that the frustrating part for her is her sisters, in her eyes, abandoned her and left her with their abusive dad, who I'm pretty sure was raping all of them, or I can't say rape on camera.
I don't think he was, though.
It kind of, to me, felt like he either touched them or beat them.
He beat them.
But anyway, so this abusive man who, once his wife died, lost his shit, basically. That was when Juniper was born.
I don't think he was sexually abusive. It was, physically and mentally abusive.
So he was abusive. And in her eyes, they abandoned her and left her there in that environment. And so when they joined the cause sort of half-assed, in her opinion, it gives her the same feelings of abandonment. They left me once before, they're leaving me now again. It's sort of that whole I have to do everything for myself, thing that she goes through.
Yeah, and especially when, Agnes tries to step back because she's pregnant, Juniper doesn't take it very well. And it's understandable, she definitely has abandonment issues, but at the same time, it's understandable from the sister's perspective, Agnes is pregnant. If she ends up in jail, they're gonna take her kid away when she has it. It's gonna be awful. Yeah, she wants a better world for her daughter, where her daughter can be free and not have to deal with the same shit she has, but it's a very, very, very thin line for her between doing that and ending up endangering her child in the process of trying to make a better world for her. So, especially with Agnes, there was they had a lot more at stake.
Mm-hmm.
I think the two older sisters than Juniper did.
Right. Well, Juniper, was already fleeing because she murdered her father. She was already in this position where she was doing something reckless, and she just wanted to amp it up. She'd already killed their dad, right? And she escaped, pretty much.
Fair.
So I think at that point, for her, it's I found the power to do this thing. Now I feel like I have the power to do this other thing. Yeah. But I think Agnes really only rejoined because of August. And I say that because he made her feel safe and comfortable. She talks about, feeling safe with him, and nothing bad's gonna happen to her. And I think
especially after she has the conversation with him about how his mother, seemed to not care that his dad died, and, signed the papers when the company said it was an accident, and Agnes was like, I would do the same fucking thing. If she hadn't signed the papers, if she had fought, you would have been taken away from her. So then she would have had to deal with her husband dying and her kid being taken away. And that was, a wake-up call for August, who was just like,
right, I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah,
before.
He never thought about that, and it's because he didn't think about things from a woman's perspective. Mm-hmm. But then having his support, and then having him use that same perspective kind of on her, well, don't you want your daughter to not have to go through that, essentially, helped.
Right.
And her sisters had a part to play in that, too.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't all August.
No.
I keep wanting to say Augustus.
I think he was definitely a factor in that, mm-hmm. because he okay, so there is a scene in the book where she goes to this bar, this underground bar full of fucking men, mm-hmm. walking in with her pregnant ass self, you know, I need to speak to Mr. August Lee, basically, because he's the one that in Chicago, like, him and some men use magic to, like,
fight a railroad. I think they were, like, trying to fight for, like, labor rights, and they, like, rusted all the railroad tracks and essentially, like, brought things to a stop to, like, help out their protest.
Right. So she wants to try to find some men's magic. They want to try to find men's magic to see maybe if they can use that in their fight against Gideon Hill and all of this good stuff. And she goes into this bar, and he does a cute little, like, trick or whatever where he cracks a glass.
Using a match.
Yeah. Using a match. Basically using a spell. And I think he tells her, like, if you can do that, then I'll help you. Mm-hmm. And when she goes to use the match, she shatters every glass in the fucking room. Yeah. And he, from that moment on, is, like, obsessed with her because he knows she's a bad bitch. Like, he's like, this is a strong fucking woman, and I think he's attracted to that. Like, let's be real, who isn't? But he's a gem. She's a gem. Their story is A+. I love everything about their story. Like, I would not change anything about their romance. It is beautiful and perfect and honestly, like, a really good selling point.
Looks like Linda Evangelista.
Period.
Is smiling.
Exactly.
Stone to those tights.
Stone those tights. Like, and also the relationship with Beatrice and Cleo and her trying to, like, accept herself. Like, even her sisters are kind of like, you're a lesbian? Like,
La Dollar mean?
La Dollar mean? Like, they're kind of not...
Because when she got sent away to, like, essentially a conversion school, mm-hmm. essentially. So,
like a boarding house for gays. Yeah. But to make you straight, right? So she got sent away for that, and she spent all these years trying to force away her feelings and try to forget, you know, who she really was. And that kind of ends when her sister comes into town. Both the sisters, I'm sorry. Agnes was already living there. Juniper comes. But she throws that shit out the window, and she has this amazing, like, passionate romance with a woman of color, which is also
scandalous at the time
because they spend a lot of time together in public. They spend a lot of time doing research and trying to find spells and witches and all this stuff, and people are, like, looking at Beatrice like she's lost her damn mind because she's out in the street with a black woman, like, or they go into the wrong part of town, you know what I mean? And people are giving her these kind of looks, and Beatrice is very fiercely protective of her. She seems meek, honestly, but she's not. She's not meek at all. She's very protective.
It just takes her a while to be comfortable in her own self and her own power after years and years and years of abuse and manipulation by both her father and
Agnes,
the boarding school. Yeah.
Her and Agnes played against each other, but I think that was mostly due to the dad and not due to them. I think
Well, Beatrice didn't even out Agnes.
No, it was the boy, but
Agnes thought Beatrice had.
And that's why Beatrice got sent away, because she said, you know, that I caught her with the pastor's daughter again or something, so, like, this had clearly happened before, and she'd been punished for it before, but she went and did it again, so clearly it's a problem, and we need to send you away. And I think Agnes just stayed in the house, right? I think she...
No, Agnes got sent away to an aunt.
Oh, that's right.
Because Juniper was the only one left.
And she was little. She was like 7, maybe? Because it was like 10 years later that they all, you know, come together again. So she was really little when that happened. And
she almost killed her dad that time, too.
And it was magic. It was magic. It was her own pure, like, magic boiling inside of her.
Seeing that her sisters were about to be hurt, and she was just like, nope.
It started a whole fucking fire.
Burned down their barn.
But that's also a very interesting point, because the author is not really saying that magic doesn't exist. The author's really trying to say, like,
it's your own will.
It's your own will, yeah.
Because, a lot of the premises, you have to have the ways, the ways, and the will.
And the will's the most important.
But, yeah, and as they kind of come to the end of the book, they kind of realize, like, the words and the ways aren't as important as the wills, and sometimes they don't matter at all.
Right. And it just matters. So, basically, it's sort of like magic lives inside of you already.
And it kind of sort of falls in line, like, in my opinion, in a lot of paganistic or Wiccan or other types of spiritualities like that, like their kind of view on magic, where it's your willpower manifesting things. It kind of has that feeling of it where magic never went away. You just have to have the will to access it and the understanding, like, kind of the world around you and what's going on.
And it's sort of too, like, it's not just your will, it's a group effort. It's a bond. And this strong bond that these three sisters had, and all these women, all their friends that come into play when magic does finally, quote unquote, reappear into the world, like, that's an important driving factor, is a collective, like, group will. And you know what I mean? Because if Gideon's going around killing all these witches, there's less will in the world. There's less practitioners. There's less people to bring it into the world. And as that's happening, they get weaker and weaker and weaker because there's no, like, collective, basically. And so when they start to bring the Sisters of Avalon and the Witches of Color into play, and their group willpower becomes stronger, like, the more magic they're able to conduct, like, the bigger the displays they're able to put on, and the crazier the things they're able to do, you know. So that's definitely, like, a big overarching theme in the book is, you know, bonds of sisterhood and friendship and all that good stuff.
Yeah, overall, I think I personally gave it like a 4.5 stars when I rated it. I don't know if you use ratings or not or anything like that. But yeah, when I rated it, I gave it like 4.5 stars, and yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend the book. And it's like 500 something pages, but it's like formatted like a YA book, so it's like fairly large text and fairly spaced out. So that, combined with the fact that the plot was there was a lot going on, like, it was like a thing after thing after thing after thing, it makes for a very quick read. So yeah, I would recommend it. Anything else you want to say?
No.
Okay.
Just that it's real good and you should probably read it.
Yeah. So thank you for watching if you've made it this far. And thank you for being here with us on our first episode of Baked Goodreads. Let me know down below if you like this idea. I know I don't feel too baked, though. I feel like I would have been funnier if I was more baked, but whatever. Let me know down below if you liked it. Go ahead, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, you know, all that YouTube stuff. And we will see you all in the next one. Bye!